So thank you very much, Anshu. It's a powerful presentation. I want to invite to the stage Goonj co-founder Meenakshi, please. And can we have another round of applause? So in terms of just kind of giving us a bit of a frame for the discussion here, I want to first of all just kind of put a fine point on this and issue a bit of a challenge. These are two of the world's most remarkable social innovators. And this crowd, this Launch Council, is a relatively business-oriented one, and that's a good thing. But we've made a very fine point in Launch of also wanting to assist remarkable social innovators. So this is going to challenge this group to think very differently. Because this organization is about social innovation, and it's a nonprofit, and it is going to remain a nonprofit. So just with that as a frame, I think I want to try and draw out a couple, basic points back from the presentation. So first, I think as the bottom line, I think for us as we were preparing with you all over the past few days, I think it's that you used waste streams as a lever for economic and social transformation. And that you really find lost value in Indian society of all different kinds and use it to transform just opportunities for communities. I mean, can you just expand a little bit on that as your philosophy and kind of, and that concept and build it out a little bit for us?
I think what we have done is, there's nothing new because this is an age-old charity. The moment you talk about charity for 90% people is about giving old cloth. Although we differ, we say that whenever you say that I want to donate cloth, that's actually a wrong and overstatement because you never donate, you actually discard. Anything which you've already used to the core, how can you actually say that you are donating? Also, in the entire process, we have just valued the system. We have just valued the strength of people. So biggest strength not only in Indian society but many other society is the wisdom of people for whom we work and we never use. Because we always go to people with our own wisdom, whatever we have acquired with the help of our education and ecosystem or whatever, without understanding that these people are also surviving for the last 500 years at the same place, and they have no complaints that way. We want them to change because we want the world to change, in a very cliche statement. But the fact remains that they are happy. They enjoy their festivals. Fine, they go through a very tough phase, but there is wisdom. They are the best people to understand that how to manage the resources. They are the best people in terms of technology because the people of that particular village only know that in the month of July how much water will come. So if I have to make a bridge, how should it look like? What should be the height? So that's why I think these things are successful. And that's what we want to do. We want to, in Indian history, one of the biggest assets we used to have was, in Hindi we call it Shramdan, which means free labor, which means community labor. That was the biggest asset. If you talk about the entire freedom movement and later development and all, that's how people used to contribute. We have been able to revive that in the entire process. So I think that's the core philosophy, and we want to remain like a social enterprise, and we want people to become a part of it because it is ultimately a social movement.
Thank you. So I want to focus a little bit on impact, and I've backed us up to your impact slide. This presentation was head-spinning in those terms because you talked about that your baseline budget is $500,000, and this is what you achieve with it. And it was probably a little bit overwhelming for people to hear because this is impact across a bunch of different streams of activities. And for me, the first thing to say here is that you all absolutely blow up the traditional NGO model. And that's really powerful. So I think, can you talk about impact across kind of various sectors of the social, of social sectors? It's kind of hard to put it into adequate words because you don't really see sectoral work in a siloed way the way most organizations do. So just take us through impact at the community level across kind of different ways we think of in traditional sectors.
Right. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you. I think what you see here is what you can possibly, sort of figure out in numbers, but there are different dimensions. So the bridge that you saw or the water cleaning, the pond cleaning that you see. I mean, those are the things that if you talk about a pond, for example, now for a community who's living next to the pond, if you have a water which is more accessible, certainly for agricultural purposes, for their day-to-day work, for different functions, that particular pond cleaning suddenly starts working in different ways. A bridge built on a river for which they had to earlier walk like 20 kilometers, they suddenly have a bridge, and so that opens up different dimensions. They're able to do better business, they have more interaction, children are able to go to schools. So those dimensions, I mean, we couldn't possibly capture enough to be able to put on a slide, really. And the third thing, I think that's what Anshu was trying to highlight, is the human dimension. When you talk about empowering people, when we get a community to repair a road or build a road, suddenly, or when they dig a well for themselves, suddenly they understand that they don't have to wait for anyone to come and solve their problems, that they can solve their problems themselves. Or they even, in many cases, they actually have gone to the local administration and said, look, we dug up this basic well. Now, can you come and make it concrete? So they start demanding their rights from the governance. So those are the things that, I don't think we can capture enough.
Also, I think there is one thing, this is one work which does not apply to one particular geography, one particular caste, community, or one particular area of work. So this is not like education, water, agriculture, those kind of specific things. Because we need to understand that in the developing nations primarily, people need a comprehensive package somewhere, where, because if you go to a village and just solve the water problem, ultimately the fact remains that it is not solved. I mean, you must have heard this very often, in a disaster hit situation, people often say that villages have got water because a tanker is gone and supplied water, without understanding that the villagers do not have a pot to hold water. So the tanker goes there and tanker goes out and comes back next day. As per record, village got water. But when you do not have anything to hold, how do you get water? So I think what we have done, we have just made it a comprehensive package that do not take us as a different or as a new organization or as a new entity. We are only here to fill up the gaps. This is something where the old material is a tool for education, for village development, for water related work, for agriculture, anything and everything which is needed in that particular area or that particular village.
Great, thanks. So I want to take us just to talking a little bit about the needs that you want to kind of workshop and talk about today with the council. So for you, as we've been talking about it, I'm actually going to hone in on the second point first. As we've been talking about it over the past few days, you've been emphasizing that your interest is growing not only as an organization, but mostly as an idea in terms of knowledge sharing and spreading your methods. So tell us a little bit about that, because I really do think there are people in the room who can help with that.
Now we have just tested a model, tried that, and it is working well. So there is no reason that it does not work in many other economies across the globe. It's very simple. That's why we need a powerful documentation. We need a lot of stories to come out. We want it to become a subject so that ultimately it dents the policy. I mean, you can imagine when I spoke about sanitary pad in 2004, 2005, there was nothing. Today, even Indian government has realized the entire thing, and they have also released a major amount in terms of a government scheme to provide sanitary pad to the people. So I think there are a lot of issues across the globe where people are working, but I always say that enough of people who are working on machines. Now you need people who work on the needles also. So when you talk about the women health related issues, ultimately sanitary pad is one of the most ignored basic needle. I mean, you can imagine in 2007 we won an award from the World Bank, that Global Development Marketplace Award. We were there and there were a lot of issues on sustainability, measurability, impact assessment and all. All those typical buzzwords of today, which are important. But then we raised a very basic question. We said that you guys are the biggest funders on this earth. Fine. How many health projects have you ever funded which had a separate budget for sanitary pad? No answer. How many health projects have you ever seen which had a mention of sanitary pad? No answer. Now, if I ask you, that do you really need a qualitative, quantitative research or analysis? Or is just a basic common sense that if you solve the problem of sanitary pad, half of women health related issues will not even come up? Am I wrong? That's what we just want to do. And that's why this entire knowledge sharing, this, so that it becomes a part of the academics, people start studying these gap areas. That's why we are keen on this.
Great. And as a really quick point, I think you have technology inputs as a first point, which I think speaks to this, both in terms of kind of monitoring and documentation, but also I think you've expressed that as part of improving your supply chain operations across the different activities, that you really feel like there's some potential in the room that can help with that. So we'll focus on that in the rotations. I want to give the council a chance now. I will go first to Conde, then to Scott, and then to Tabriz. And I've seen a bunch of hands, so I'll ask you again to put hands up when we get past these questions. Thanks.
Have you been able to do your sanitary pad as a presentation for UNICEF and WHO? Second, your model seems to depend a lot on culture, the culture of your people to do community service. Given that requirement, how do you see this replicable internationally? Third point is that I see in West Africa, for example, a big challenge and fight with those who are making millions out of the used clothes business. And finally, thanks for embarrassing me, I distributed some free clothing in my village. And the adults were fighting with the kids. They were meant for the kids. But I realize now I did the wrong thing. I should have done it your style.
Fine. So, people are watching us. We are a part of, we were just recently invited for the WASH Forum also in India when it happened. So, people are understanding the work, and a lot of people from all these big agencies are also coming and just seeing our production and the way we work. So that is one. Culture, to be honest, we are not very much worried. You know why? Because if you see India is mix of so many cultures, so many dimensions. Every single state has absolutely different kind of people and the way they react. So it is one of the finest lab, to experiment. And what you say, we are facing on a regular basis. Someone does not want to receive old cloth because of a caste community system. Somewhere there is a strong opinion leader, that's why there is a barrier. Somewhere there is political system which does not want us to grow in that particular region, then there is a system. So, but I think we have been able to break all these, somewhere very quick, somewhere which certainly took a lot of time to break, just on a very basic issue, because ultimately we are talking about the basic needs of people, which is ultimately a basic need. You can talk a lot about, even in India, people say in certain parts that, in tribal culture, women do not wear anything on the top. In a country where for 99.99% women, the first priority is to cover herself, fine. You need to understand that if the tribal woman is not covering herself at a certain point, is the issue of access to the material. Not just the culture. What is culture? When you practice everything again and again, it becomes a culture. Why do you practice? Because there is compulsion.
Scott?
So really amazing, quite remarkable. One question is, have you done anything to put a price? So you asked the question about there's a competition of, clothing sellers, and that creates a price for what the value of those clothing is. Have you put a price on the infrastructure project so you can back into it and show the leverage to your potential donors? So for example, being able to say, hey, you give us $10,000, we can build a $100,000 bridge because we can leverage that $10,000 to get essentially $100,000 worth of clothing that we can get donated as an input to this that gets the leverage out.
We have done those exercises to some extent, I think, because ultimately, if you see every single unit is accounted for, there are lots and lots of system of tracking, of measuring all these things. So if we can even tell you that if we send so many trucks of material, what is our monetary value? If we talk about a bridge, how many man hours have we saved? But to be honest, we do not want to get into that particular direction right now. The data is available. We can very well talk that language. But we do not want to, as on date, because we just want to experiment in a bit different manner. That more than the economic calculations, just see the social impact of your old material. That's the baseline of it. But ultimately, even this is like priced. This is like priced, and we do charge people for this, or we get a sponsorship, to go to the village.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get at your fourth or fifth bullet there around the financial resources, a way to tell a story that's going to allow you to bring the fuel in to be able to grow. So I'm not changing the empowerment story that you have, but upstream to your donors in the market, they only deal with dollars. That's what they do. So you can either try to change their minds, which is probably futile, or you can just play their game to get the leverage that you want to roll out the program that you have.
Yeah, and I think one challenge to point out here is that, in our discussions the past few days, Goonj is clearly not very interested in taking donor money with a lot of strings. So that's something that we'll bring to the impact rotation. It means that they will not be eligible for funding for some of the organizations in this room, and I think they're fine with that.
We are fine. I mean, you can imagine if 500 people commit $1,000 a year, we are done. It's very simple. Yeah. And if in our lifetime we cannot find these 500 people on this earth, then there is something wrong.
So I'll go to Breeze, please, and then to Usha and to Mikkel.
First of all, I'd just like to say thank you for all the work that you do and have done. It's incredibly inspiring. I have a sort of two-part question. The first is, what is your goal for this? If you think 5 years, 10 years, what would you like to see happen? And then of all the things that you list there, what are the limiting constraints in terms of, or the most limiting constraints in terms of you realizing those goals?
Okay. So in terms of goal, we certainly see ourselves as a movement. And that's why we say that, organization is growing at a particular pace, and we do not want to grow as an organization. We want to grow as an idea, and that's why we are talking about the replication kit, we are talking about the documentation. Also, we are in the process of making that replication kit where we want to say that we are giving you a copyright to copy our ideas. So it's going to become a very, very open source that way. That's the ultimate vision or ultimate goal. Apart from certainly bringing, especially clothing in the list of development subjects. That's something we certainly want at a policy level, and the organizations who support development work also need to support work on the clothing. That's the ultimate objective, because so far you don't get that. I mean, I remember when we were growing and we said that, we somehow got some, because two of us belong to communication field and all that, and Meenakshi left BBC, I left Escorts, a corporate, career and all. So we didn't know anything about the so-called NGO or the development world. So we got some address, we wrote to some funding agencies saying that, we need some support in terms of scaling up and all. Every single institution wrote back to us by saying that it does not fall in our parameter. So I think that became a challenge for us, that instead of talking about our work, can we do something so that it starts falling in parameter? So if you talk about the ultimate vision, that is the one. If you talk about what is stopping us, not much, but because in the middle of hundreds of emotional stories, ultimately it's a hardcore logistic work. And logistics are getting more and more expensive. And with the nature of work, we actually just cannot move our base to the villages. We have to remain in the heart of the big cities. So that's one of the biggest challenges which we are facing as on date.
Can we get a mic to Usha, please? Oh, you have one.
Hi, Anshu, thank you. It was a great presentation, and as an Indian, very inspiring. Thank you. But here's my question. I'm struggling with this a little bit. You've created a really powerful social platform for social change in rural areas, whether it's India or anywhere else. And going from his question just now, I'm not seeing where you want to go still. I heard what you said. And here's why. Sometimes when I fund companies, right, those companies are looking to partner with social platforms to achieve a goal which is not just dollars and cents, right? So I fund schools, for example, and the schools realize, especially in rural areas, that kids don't come to the school, girls don't come to the school because they don't have uniforms, or they don't have sanitary napkins and so on and so forth. Could you, therefore, if you take that as an example, could you break down your impact model into streams and say, who can I partner with to really use my social platform to combine with, let's say, a business platform to create a much larger impact? And I'm struggling with this because I don't know if that's something
it is
you're
relevant,
thinking
and
about.
to be honest, it is already broken in different parts. So what you see out here is the larger impact part, but we also divide, I mean, we also have fixed up certain targets that, if you are talking about 1,000 tons a year right now, in 2 years, what do we do? What all states we cover? Which particular belt we cover in the time to come? Like eastern part of India goes through a very bad phase in terms of disaster and, in terms of poverty and all. So that is the focus area. So we have all those plans in place, and many, especially the corporate tie-ups which are happening with us in terms of monetary things also. We give a package because there is a larger cake and then there are slices. So we cut those slices that fine with this particular money, we will take care of 100 schools in this particular area, 100 education center in this area, cloth for work, 200 activities in this particular area. That's how we divide.
So I think we have time for 3 more. I will go to Santiago first, please, and then Mikkel and Dave to close. Sorry for those I'm not going to get. Sorry.
My question was exactly the same that Usha has asked. And if you are behind a movement and a big idea, I think that the partnership strategy is a very crucial one for scalability and the definition of what is core to you guys and how you can complement that either through logistics or other capabilities that other organizations can offer, I think is quite a crucial one. And so maybe in the presentation, just understanding more your partnership strategy, I think would be helpful on that regard.
Yeah, so fine, if just to answer in a short, rest we can take care there. There is a defined target. So if you talk about 250 partner groups in 21 states, that's a part of the strategy. And we know that in the next year, how many partners we have to add in the entire list.
And to put a point on that, that's executing partners
Yes,
in the local community.
In the local communities.
Yep.
Whom we choose after a lot of due diligence and all that. Similarly with the corporate sector or the urban part, that how much we have to collect, how many co-branded campaigns we have to do in a year, which we do with many multinationals and all, just to create awareness.
I worked for you in Europe for a long time, and I've been in India many times with the Shakti program and also with Lifeboy and some of those kind of large health, movements. And there is a huge amount of synergy, when they, have a similar network and a similar empowering approach, right? Yeah. And so I'm just thinking how you guys can complement what you're doing and bring the dimension that you've learned to just extend, a collective movement. That's
Okay, Mikkel.
Thanks. First, congratulations. I think what you're doing is super excited, and I think you're sitting on a lot of value that can potentially be unlocked because you specifically sitting with a system where you can incentivize behavior change, and where you've documented that you have incentivized behavior change, and there's a lot of value in that. My first question is around the scale. You had a lot of impressive numbers on impact, but also I think I heard you said that you're in 21 states. Even if you focused on the state of Assam, there would still be a great need in the state of Assam with all those outcome numbers there. So I think in the impact rotation, I'll be curious to know sort of why you're spreading yourselves so thin. Second, to Will's comment about the second bullet, if we're zooming in on the innovations here, I think often, even in this group, we're making the mistake that by default we think of innovations as technology innovations. I think that there is a lot greater need in development aid for innovations around concepts, delivery, and specifically management. So one of the great opportunities that I think you have here is in integration. And just take the state of Assam, or the entire country of India, for instance, is having these school feeding programs. So thinking about integrating with something some programs like that in order to reach further out. But even the state of Assam, as we were mentioning, they're now going out to the 6,000 schools. Sorry? Yeah, schools. All right. I'll be fast. So just quickly, polio. I think right now there's a great demand for high level of monitoring at community level with incentivized behavior change. So I think something like that would be incredible to try and integrate with. I have a lot more. We can do that in the
I think there's a lot to discuss.
So I think, I'll give you a quick answer. As far as spreading thin is done, to be honest, we are not spreading thin, if you see the entire part of it. Because, it's about developing a culture in different parts of the country. So what is happening eventually that in many areas, people have started taking up their own initiatives in the same line, Or also when we talk about 21 states, we only say we have entered in parts of 21 states. Because taking care of one Indian state itself is a huge, humongous task. And you cannot do anything with 1,000 tons of material. But what has eventually happened is that a lot of local tie-ups have started happening. This is the first time when even the corporate sector has developed a culture where there is a regular non-disaster giving or collection campaigns. It never used to happen in India.
Can I
Great.
just add to
Yeah,
that?
please.
I think we would also like to point out that the collection bit from the cities is a much easier task because people have so much discard sitting in their homes. It is the distribution and the implementation. It's easy for us to just pick up stuff from the cities and just give it in the villages. But the way we want to do it is to get them to do some work. And that is where you have various entities. Anshu was talking about political pressure and partner groups not understanding these things. So that's where this changing of mindsets, that is where the whole culture that he's talking about, that is what is taking time. And that's why we want to go to organizations and ask them, work with them on these ideas and get them to think about it. And then it's not very difficult for a partner group who's sitting in Assam to be able to get the material from Assam itself in one of the cities and to get it to the rural area of Assam itself.
Do you have access to enough clothes?
To access to?
To enough clothing?
Yeah. Cloth, utensil, footwear, all kind of material.
I mean, I don't think, in our lifetime, if there were sort of 10 Goonj organizations, and if you look at the demand and if you look at the supply, how much people are having in their homes, in their wardrobes, or just in, their households. And how much they're looking for a channel to discard it in a way that it's used constructively.
Because India,
I think there's a huge demand and supply.
You actually do not have middle class. That's what we say. India has the biggest middle class, but to be honest, it is not there because India operates on extremes. On one part, you have such rich people. On one part, you have so many financially poor people.
Okay, so I am going to cede the floor to he who has demanded it, to Dave, to close us out.
Thank you. This is really great, and I appreciate it. But I want to put a fine point on this issue of innovation and your model. Right? This is a demand-driven, empowering approach, right? For development, and in international development, we're often the one with the used clothing that we are pushing, right? And being able, with you all being able to turn those resources into a demand-driven and empowering approach is a significant innovation that we need to help. All right? I think for the impact rotations, I'll be very interested in hearing about the scale issue, sort of your vision. I think we could use some more of that. But how have you done any efforts to translate it out to the documentation, knowledge, impact, to be able to get other people able to pick up your model and use it?
In India, many people are doing that, but abroad, it still has to happen. Nepal, some people have tried, and are doing it. But the only problem out here, which is taking time, is that there is something which is there for centuries, which is about giving cloth as charity. So the biggest issue right now is to break that model and then build up something new. That's taking time in the entire process.
All right, well, I'm afraid we're a little bit over time, but thank you all so much for your interest. Thank you again.